So in most of the video games, you have seen that whenever an enemy hits our player, there is a marker which shows our enemy direction and help our player telling that from which direction the shot has come. And this mechanism is common in most of the games. So in this video we will be doing the same. Okay, so now let's talk how we are going to implement the marker mechanic. So imagine this green dummy is our player and our player has a gun, and the red dummy is our enemy. The enemy too has a gun. So our enemy will fire a bullet which will travel towards our player, and after it hits the player, what we will do is we will create a marker scene and we will instantiate to our player. And what our marker scene will do is it will get our enemy location and it will rotate towards our enemy so that our player can know which direction our enemy is present. So after showing the direction, we will gradually fade out our marker, so it will completely fade out and the case 1 finishes. So now this was true for enemy hitting a first bullet, and imagine now there comes a case 2 where again the same setup. This is player, this is enemy. Enemy hits the first bullet, the enemy marker shows our player position, and for the second bullet what our enemy do is it will move towards a different position and then it will hit our player. So this means our enemy is hitting from 2 different directions, and then if the enemy hits our player from 2 different directions, there will be 2 different arrow marks, like first one showing that our enemy is present here and the second one showing our enemy is present here. So if there are more number of enemies in your scene, then the arrow mark can be like fully placed at this point, and if hits, the arrow mark will show that our enemy is present here. And if enemy moves towards a different position and hit our player, then our player will remember that yeah, the same enemy has moved towards a different position and now the enemy is hitting from a different position. So there will be a single arrow mark which will only refer towards a single enemy, and this will avoid the case 2 errors like showing multiple markers. So let's get started. Okay, so at the beginning what we will do is we will select our player. In the nodes, in the group section, we will group our player in a group called player, then click on add. And next what we will do is we will select our player, then add a special node, and we will name the special node as marker, so that we will add all our markers under this marker node so that our player scene tree will not look so ugly. So after that what we'll do is we'll open up our player script and we will create an array by saying variable enemy number equals to square brackets. So here square brackets means an array. Array we are giving the name as enemy number, and all the other codes are for my play movement and nothing else. So only this line you have to create in your in your player script. So after this, so to create a marker scene, add a special node and call it as marker. Next again add a special node and call it as arrow. So this arrow node will be useful to get our enemy location. Next again add a texture rect node. So this texture rect node will be useful to display our enemy position. So I'll be naming it as pointer. Next I'll be using this triangle shaped texture to display my enemy location. So just drag and drop the texture to this texture slot in your pointer node. Now you will see that the blue line is our viewport and our texture is too large. So to scale the texture, what I'll do is I'll click on expand so that I can scale my texture. Next in the rect, I'll change the size to a lower value. You can see I am changing it approximately this small. So next click on layout, click on center so that your texture is at center. But now we don't want our texture to be center. What we want is we want our texture to be visible around this axis. Okay, so here you can see that this is x axis and this is y axis. So we want our texture to be at here. So we will change the texture location in y axis. So what I'll do is I'll change the position y value to a lower number. So it's approximately at this position. Now if you press Ctrl and left click, you can see our texture is rotating. It's not rotating properly. The pivot is here and it's rotating accordingly. So what we do is we want our pivot to be present here so that our texture rotates in this axis. So to place our pivot, what I'll do is in the x-axis I want the pivot to be half. So the size is 60 here. So in the pivot offset, I'll just reduce it to half, like it's 60 here, so I'll put 30 so that our pivot is at the center of x-axis. Now to change in the y-axis, I'll just duplicate the y number to 200. So if these both numbers are not equal as mine, then you can just change accordingly so that your pivot is at center. So now if you press Ctrl and left click and drag, you can see the texture is now properly rotating. So now what we'll do is we'll save our scene. Press Ctrl S to save. Click on save. Now we will attach script to our marker scene. So select the main node, click on this icon, change the template to no comment, click on create. So at the beginning we'll create reference for our these two nodes. So right, already our arrow in the path for our arrow node. Next, already our pointer and the path for our pointer node. So after this, create two variables called player and enemy. So the player variable will store our player information like the player name, and the enemy variable will store our enemy information like our enemy name. So next, create a process function. So before writing code further, what we'll do is we will select our pointer node, and then in the visibility section here you can see that there is an option of modulate with a value. So if you drag the a value to the left, you can see our texture fully fade out, and if you drag the a value to the right, our texture becomes visible. So once our enemy bullet hits our player, what we'll do is the texture will point out our enemy direction. So once it points out our enemy direction, we will gradually fade out our texture. So to gradually fade out our texture, we will use the a value. So in the script, in the process function, write pointer modulate dot a minus equals delta. So here the process function means when our scene is in the main game, or you can say it as when our scene is present in the game, what it will do is it will decrease our modulate alpha value with our time. So it means our pointer will gradually fade out. So once our pointer completely becomes transparent, then what we'll do is we will delete our marker scene. So right, in the player script here, the enemy number will keep tracking of our enemy and our marker scenes. So what we will do here is we will just say player enemy number arrays, and here we pass the parameter as enemy. So I'll be explaining this code later bit. So at present just write same. So after this, what I'll do is I will create the enemy bullet scene, and I will make the enemy to fire. So if you don't want to make the process of enemy bullet firing, you can just go to further chapters. Else I suggest you to watch the full tutorial. So for the enemy bullet, what I will do is I will add a raycast node and click on enable. I'll change the y to 0 and z to approximately 1000, and I will save the scene as enemy bullet. So after this, what I'll do is I'll open up my enemy scene. So this is my enemy scene. I'll go to my enemy script. So at the beginning we will preload our enemy bullet scene. So to preload the enemy bullet scene, write onReady var bull short for bullet equals to preload, and here we pass the path for our enemy bullet scene. So if you don't know the path, then what you can do is just go to the file system section and search for enemy bullet. When you select your enemy bullet scene, here you will see that you have the path for your enemy bullet scene. So just copy and paste it inside the quotation mark like this. So now we are preloading our enemy bullet scene. So after this, we will create three variables called bullet, and we don't assign any value for this. So the bullet variable will store our bullet information, and the second variable we create is canfire, which is set to true, and the last one is time delay, again which is set to false. So I'll be explaining why I have created these two variables. So after this, we will create a function called shoot. So write func shoot, and here I am not passing any parameter. So in this function, we will make our enemy to fire bullets in a time interval. So in this function, write if our campfire is true. So initially we set our campfire to true, so this line will work. And then bullet equals to bull.instance, which means we make a copy of our bullet scene. So then what we do is we just add the bullet as a child of enemy, and then we set our campfire to false and we set our time delay to true. So after this, right, if time delay is true, so in the campfire statement we set our time delay to true. So if this is true, then we just check if our bullet is colliding to any objects, and if our bullet is colliding any object, then we just delete our bullet by saying bullet.queue_free, and then we set our time delay to false. After we set our time delay to false, we write yield get tree create timer. Here the wait time we pass it as 0.2 seconds. So this is the wait time, or you can say it as the firing bullet interval. Like after 0.2 seconds, again our bullet is fired. So after 0.2 seconds, what we do is we set our campfire to true, and again this whole statements run, and after that this will run. So the reason we create two different variables like campfire and time delay is because as soon as we add our bullet as a child of enemy, our bullet cannot calculate the present world. Like our bullet is just born yet, and it will not know how to work. So as soon as we just add a child, we just make this statement false, so that our game engine will not make more number of copies of our bullet. So it will just at the beginning it will just make a single copy, and it will wait for the copy to run on the present scene. And if the copy runs, like if the copy is colliding, then we'll just delete the bullet, and then again we create the next copy. So this will not, like adding two statement will avoid making multiple copies, and it will avoid Godot to crash. So that's the reason I created two different variables. So now what we will do is we will call our shoot function in the process function. So just write function underscore process, and here the parameter we pass it as delta. So this is an inbuilt Godot function, and here we just call our shoot function which we created here. So after this, what we will do is make sure you enable all the four options. So now what I will do is I will open up my main scene. So this is my main scene, and here what I will do is I will instantiate my enemies to my main scene and see how the shooting mechanism is working. So enemy, control D to duplicate the enemies. Select all the enemies. I will place it above the ground, and now sorry, the first enemy I'll place it approximately here. The second enemy, go there. Third enemy, go around there, and I will even rotate the enemy. So the rotation is now random. So now I'll run my main scene. So if I run my main scene, I'll check whether the enemies are shooting or not, and you can see yes, the enemy shooting mechanism is working properly. So now what we will do is we will make the marker mechanism to work properly. Like if the enemy is firing me, then the marker will show from which direction the enemy is firing. So again, go to your enemy script. So here what you do is at the beginning we will preload our marker scene. So just write on ready war mk short for marker equals to preload, and here we pass the path for our marker scene. So after this, we will create two variables called pointer, and the next variable, sorry, the first variable is arrow and the next variable is pointer. So we don't assign any value for these two variables. So after this, after this line, write variable collided body equals to bullet dot get collider. So here what we do is the whichever object our bullet has colliding, so we will store it in our collided body variable. So after this, we say if collided body is in group of player. So here if you remember in your player scene, if you select your player main node in the groups, you will remember that we have placed our player in a group called player. So in if our bullet is colliding to any object, and if the object is in group player, then what we will do is we will create a variable called marker equals to mk.instance, which means we make a copy of our marker scene. So after that we say marker.player. So here player again is the variable, this one. So to access this variable, we just say marker.player equals to collided body. So here our collided body is player, so we just assign our player to to our marker.player variable, and again we assign the enemy variable to self.name. Here self again is our enemy, so you can notice here we are writing our script in enemy. So we just say marker.enemy equals to self.name. So after this we will check if our enemy name is present in our player enemy number array, so this array. So to check that, what we will do is we write if self name is not in our collided body dot enemy number array. So if our enemy name is not present in our enemy number array, then what we do is we just append our enemy name in our enemy number array. So we just use append, and here in the parameters we just say self.name to append our enemy name to our enemy number array. So after that what we do is we assign our arrow variable which we have created here. So we assign it as marker.getNode, and here we get our arrow node of our marker scene, and then we do the same thing, pointer equals to marker.getNode, and here we again say pointer. So after this what we do is we just say collided body dot get node markers. So if you remember in your player scene, here we have created a node called marker, so I'll make it as markers. So again remember that the name should be again same. So player dot get node marker dot add child, here we add our marker as a child of player. So again this marker is our copy of the marker scene. So after this what we will do is we will create the function called rotate marker. So just write func rotate marker and with no parameters, and in this function what we will do is pointer dot modulate dot a equals to 1, so that we just make our pointer node to be fully visible. So we just set our alpha value to 1. So here 1 means our pointer node will be fully visible. So after that what we do is we just say arrow dot look at to look our arrow towards our enemy. So here our enemy position is self, again here self is the enemy. So enemy dot global transform dot origin, which will rotate our arrow towards our enemy, and the second parameter is vector3 dot up, which will properly align our arrow node. So after that we say point dot rect rotation equals to arrow dot rotation degrees dot y. So again if you go to your marker scene, here if you select the pointer and if you go to inspector, here you will see that there is an option called rect rotation. The property is rect rotation, and there is an option called rotation. So if you change this, you can see the arrow mark is rotating in the 2D space. So we are using this property to rotate our arrow mark towards our enemy. So again in the enemy script we just say pointer dot rect rotation equals to arrow dot rotation degrees dot y. So this means we rotate our pointer towards where our arrow is facing. So now what we will do is we will call this function after this line. So just write rotate marker with no parameters again. So now imagine if our enemy name is already present in our collided body, which means our player enemy number array. So this means our enemy has fired the second bullet and the bullet has hit to our player. So if our second bullet hits to our player, which means the first bullet, what it will do is it will append our enemy name towards our enemy number array. So it means this will only work for the first bullet but not the second bullet. So to work on the second bullet we write else if our enemy name is already present in our player enemy number array, then we just call our rotate marker function. So again in our rotate marker function, here you can see that we just set our modulate to 1, which means if pointer modulate has gone low, like if our pointer modulate has become partially transparent, then again we just make our pointer modulate to fully visible, and after that we just say look at towards player, and then again we rotate our pointer towards our enemy. So now if we test the scene, we'll go to main scene and run our main scene. Yes, okay, so here we get an array and here we get an error, and here the enemy number I did not write properly. because the name again should be same as this one. Yes. So if we run our scene now, sorry, if we run our scene now, and you can see the enemy is hitting me and the marker is now showing, but here you will notice that the marker is not showing in a proper direction, like the enemy is hitting me on the left and the marker is pointing on the right. So it's working properly on the straight, and it's showing opposite for right to left and left to right, and for again back it's showing properly. The only error we're getting is the wrong direction. So to fix that, what we will do is pointer dot rotation equals to arrow dot rotation degrees dot y multiplied by -1. So now I guess the error should be fixed. And yes, let me go towards enemy. Yes, if the enemy shooting at me, you can see the pointer is now properly working, even in a proper direction. And if two enemies shoot at a time, you can see again both the pointers are showing properly. And yes, okay, so let me explain you the last line, which is this one. So here it means player dot get enemy number, which means we get our enemy number array, and here dot erase, which means we erase our enemy name from our enemy number array. So the condition works only if our pointer modulate becomes completely transparent. So which means it's at the state where it's gonna delete itself. So before deleting, we just delete the enemy name from our enemy number array. So here again, this condition will work only if our pointer modulate is less than or equal to 0, and it means if our enemy dies, then our enemy cannot shoot the player and this condition works. Or else if our enemy has fired a single shot and after many time the enemy did not fire towards the player, then again this statement will work. And that's it for the video. Thank you guys for watching my video. If you have any questions, you can comment me below. Do like the tutorial and do comment, do subscribe and press the bell to join game development with me, and always have a great day.